Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it's time to talk Path of Exile. Today had one of the pieces of news that I think is going to be most impactful for players that expect to reach endgame content during the Synthesis League, which comes out this weekend. It's now been decided by Grinding Games that there'll be a shake-up of the Atlas of Worlds in basically every new league that comes out. And today, the details of the new Atlas were revealed by the community manager, Bex from Grinding Gear Games. So I'm sitting there at work today and out comes Bex posting this image of the new Atlas. And then, not one to let Bex have all the fun, several community members came together and took the information that she'd provided and put it in a much more easily digested form. So big thank you to Vonkenden, Embu, and Carve, and potentially others for very quickly, like literally within 2 hours of the Atlas coming out, putting together this list that shows all of the names of the maps, estimates for which tier each map is, that are pretty likely to be correct for all of them, except maybe around this section here, in the sort of northern yellow maps. There's some north and northeast yellow maps. There's a potential that there's some of those are incorrect, but even then, the vast majority of the information's there. It also lists an overlay of the octants of the Atlas that drop various Atlas bases. So Bone Helmet in the Betrayal League and also in previous leagues has dropped only in maps that are between north and northwest on the Atlas, and so likewise Marble Amulets drop in west to northwest, and Opal Rings in west to southwest, and so on. This information was all provided, as well as a definitive list of which map is in which tier in the new system. Anyways, these shakeups are a big deal for players, particularly if you've been to the Atlas of Worlds on several times across several leagues. Each league is defined heavily by the various maps that are the most popular to run. So for instance, the Betrayal League saw Tower and Desert Spring go from maps that people thought of as just, oh yeah, I'll do that once, I'll never go back to it, into two of the most popular maps that were run during that league. Tower was popular because it had the Nurse Divination card, which was newly added, and Desert Spring was popular, at least once some changes were made to it, because it had it was a tier 15 map that dropped an enormous amount of maps when you were fighting its boss. The boss spawned a whole lot of ads. Those ads produced drops that really could just vomit out maps for you. And those are maps that were basically not being touched at all in just the previous league, or in Delve League. Anyways, some of the information that we've got the information as to what map is where on the Atlas, but we are missing some information. I think it's important to say that first. We don't know whether maps on the Atlas are keeping the same bosses that they've historically had. So for instance, we can see that Tower's moved from being a tier 15 where Defile Cathedral is here, down to being a tier 13 in the South-Southwest Octant. However, we don't know that it's still going to have the Chevron and Brutus combination as the end boss. We don't know that it's still going to drop the Nurse Divination card throughout the whole map, and also the Divination card for Chevron's wrappings from the boss. It's entirely possible that it will, and in fact I expect it will, but we simply don't know that this is the case for every map. So Divination cards may move, especially ones that are thematically linked to bosses. And I do want to point out that the new location for the Lair map, Lair has been it was a map that was previously a tier 11 map, and it had a fairly difficult boss for a tier 11 map. It's now been moved to be a tier 6. I would be very, very surprised if the mechanically complex and very dangerous Rigwald fight that was at the end of the Lair map remains the end boss of the Lair map. And the divination cards are often linked to bosses. So for that reason, I would not be surprised if the divination card that dropped in Lair, which is the Wolven King's Bite, that gives you the incredibly powerful Rigwold's Quills, that may no longer be available in Lair, and it may conceivably be only available in the now Tier 15 Dark Forest map, which has a very difficult boss as well, which is also Rigwold, but it's the harder form of Rigwold. So for that reason, there's going to be some changes to divination cards that we can't predict yet. There's also new divination cards that are coming in the Synthesis League, and some of these will be impactful. I speculate, and this is pure speculation, that Monochromatic, which is the divination card for 10 Cartographer Sextants of a random tier, I speculate this will drop from Malagaro bosses, so map bosses that have Malagaro as the theme of, as the base creature that their boss is based upon. But this is just solely based upon the lore of Malagaro seeing himself as an artist. There is no guarantee I'm right, this is just what I think will happen. Some of the other divination cards that will be impactful if they drop from areas that can be target farmed, there's Arrogance of the Vaal, which is the divination card that drops a double corrupted unique, so a unique item with 2 Vaal implicits on it, and the Seeker, which drops 3 Annulment Orbs. These might be cards, divination cards, that players want to target farm late in a league, and it may impact the way that people decide to set up their Atlas. Additionally, the Mad King, which is a new divination card for the prophecy to upgrade the Kaum's Ring. It's very popular with juggernauts that want to stack every endurance charge they can. This divination card may be something that players want to target farm early in the league. And once more, we do not know where these divination cards are going to drop. We can do nothing more than speculate based on lore. And in any case, they may be somewhere completely off the Atlas as well. They may drop, for instance, in the Delve Mines or something like that. The first thing I noticed when I looked at the new Atlas is that there are absolutely no red maps that are unique. And that's a bit of a change that I think won't have as much of an impact as some people are saying. Because currently, red maps, unique maps are not a big part of the ability to sustain red maps. So, you know, you find that the red maps that drop inside unique maps are pretty minimal, with the exception of Ober's Cursed Trove, which does not actually generally adhere to the monster level that that its position on the Atlas would indicate. So for that reason, I don't think this is going to be a huge deal. It does mean that, again, there will be no Poorjoy's Asylum rotations in this league, but I don't think that's going to matter that much. So in terms of just going through tier by tier, looking at the things that jump out to me as highlights. In tier 1, Iceberg has the hideout and just has a spectacular tile set. It's not that great as a map, but there's lots of people that don't have the hideout yet. I'm one of them. I've just not got around to getting it. And I think there'll still be demand from players for the Glacial hideout. So tier 1, I think Iceberg will be the best map. Tier 2, there are 2 maps that have a lot of monsters on them. Haunted Mansion and Excavation. They also have the advantage of having very cheap Cartographer Sextant access. All of the adjacent maps are white, or all the nearby maps are white, which means that you only need white Sextants on them. This makes both of them excellent options for using your Elder Orb. If you decide that you want to use your Elder Orb, Excavation and Haunted Mansion are 2 maps you should seriously consider using it on. One more thing while we're on the topic of Sextants, it was confirmed by Grinding Your Games that every single map on the Atlas has at least 5 Sextants that can cover it, which is a big change from the Betrayal Atlas, where a whole lot of maps just do not have 4 other maps in range. I believe it looks like they've actually increased the radius of Sextants from a tweet that was put out by one of the GGG developers. They showed an image because players didn't believe that Burial Chamber was being hit by more Sextants than just Cage and Mineral Pools. And they showed that their Burial Chamber was being affected by Vault, by Olmec's Sanctum, I believe it was, Mineral Pools, Cage, and of course a Sextant on itself. So for that reason, I think they've increased the size of the area that Sextants can hit, and this is going to be a huge improvement for people that like to use a lot of cartographer Sextants. Anyways, so Tier 2, Haunted Mansion and Excavation are I feel, standouts. Haunted Mansion's also getting a hideout, and no one has that hideout yet either. So there'll be a lot of reasons to potentially go for that. Tier 3 doesn't have very much. It's got Channel is a good choice because of the Humility Divination card. I intend to use my Tier 3 Shaper's Orb on the Channel map, but I don't think I'm going to run all that many Shape Channels this league. I may decide, I mentioned in my video on acquiring a 6-link as soon as possible, I may decide to target farm Channel very early on in the league. So this is when I've only run 5 or 10 maps in the entire league. I may decide to set up my Atlas in a way that Channel is the only Tier 3 map that can drop, and then just keep running rare channels until I've got myself a tabula rasa. I haven't decided on that, and I'll probably actually only decide that while I'm leveling and seeing how my build plays out. It also depends a lot on the build that I decide to go with, because I still have not decided. Jungle Valley and Arid Lake also have some appeal here for projectile builds, because they're quite open layouts, but not as sparse as a map like Strand is. And this means that that the monsters in them, you can make full use of things like greater multiple projectiles and chaining projectiles in order to hit entire screens. Additionally, both of those have divination cards that, whilst not particularly valuable, have some early merit just for getting an item that is useful to you in the early game. So Arid Lake, for some builds, they will, basically any poison build that's using claws will be interested in killing the boss of Arid Lake a few times, because it has a very high drop rate for a divination card that gives an item level 83 Gemini Claw that has the highest tier of added chaos damage. This is not an endgame weapon, it's not close to an endgame weapon, but it's something that a character focused around poison can use until they get better. Next up, in Tier 4, we've got Underground Sea and City Square, which are both maps that have got solid divination cards that have a lot of monsters and that have predictable layouts. Tier 5, we have Crater, which has, as far as I believe it to be, the highest number of monsters of any map in the game. It's very much a viable choice for using your Tier 16 Elder Orb on. And so it has at least, if it's got the same boss, the boss is pretty manageable, although that boss can be mean at Tier 16. Now, Tier 6, we have a really interesting one. We have Burial Chambers is back. Burial Chambers has historically dropped the Doctor Divination card, which is 1/8 of a Headhunter. The Burial Chamber map is a very fast layout to navigate once you know it well, and having one of the most valuable divination cards in the game means that it will be a very popular choice for people that want to farm it. It's mostly uses yellow cartographer Sextants. Just having a look around here, you got Vault, you got Olmecs, you've got Mineral Pools and Cage and itself. So that's 4 yellow and 1 white Sextant if you're running it as a Tier 6. And if you're running it as a Tier 11, it's 1 red, 1 red, 3 yellow, and 1 white Sextant that it's got access to. However, in either case, if you're running Burial Chambers, you're probably rigging up your Atlas so that nothing else but Burial Chambers can drop at Tier 6 or at Tier 11, in which case you can have a maximum of 4 Sextants in any way. Now, there's also Lair, which has historically been a very popular map, but as I said, I speculate that the Rigwold boss is too mechanically complex and too dangerous to be a Tier 6 map boss, and I suspect that the divination card, the Wolven King's Bite, is too closely thematically tied to Rigwold himself, that if they change the boss of Lair, I don't think the divination card is going to follow with that map. And so for that reason, time will tell. We'll have to wait and see what gets confirmed in terms of actual drops in game. but I don't think that the Lair map is going to be a particularly good choice this league. Now, Tier 7, we have 3 maps that stand out. There is Spider Forest for the Doctor, same as Burial Chamber. We have Academy for the Dab of Ink Divination card, which is 1/9 of a Poet's Pen. And we have Bazaar for Saint's Treasure, because divination cards that give Exalted Orbs are always very good. They're the things that stand out at Tier 7. Tier 8, we have Volcano for Calm's Heart, and Waterworks for Humility for Tabula Rasa. Now, by the time you get to Tier 8 maps, you probably don't care about Tabula Rasa. You're probably either using a 5-link armor that has real defenses on it, or a 6-link armor that has stats on it that you've already traded for something better than a Tabula Rasa, or you've picked something up via one of the divination card sets that gives you a 6-link body armor. But throughout the entirety of the league, the Humility card will always hold a value of at least 1/9 of a Divine Orb, because 9 of them can be just simply turned in for a Tabula, and the Tabula can be vended for a Divine Orb. So Divine Orb is not a lot of loot, but with how frequently the Humility card drops, do keep in mind the option of Tier 8 Waterways, or even Tier 13 Waterways, if you want to shape it. Tier 9 I'm not very impressed with, the selection that's available there. Canyon, I will give a heads up, the boss for that, if it hasn't changed, is a lot more dangerous in a Tier 9 map than it is at either a Tier 6 or a Tier 4 as the map has been historically. That boss is mean. So be very careful. That's the duo of there's the Battle Foul and something else, but they hit hard. They hit really hard, especially once you kill one of them and the other one berserks. So yeah, Canyon, whilst the actual layout is amazing, the boss is really nasty. Yeah, so you got Museum for Dab of Ink again, I think is probably the best choice here. If you're not a projectile build, if you're a projectile build, there's probably nothing. Tier 10, we have 2 of the highest monster count maps in the game. We have Chateau, which is sitting over here, just in the northeast area, and we have Moon Temple, which is hiding just over here. These maps don't have amazing divination cards, they don't have amazing layouts, but both of them just have so damn many mobs that they're worth considering for using your Tier 10 Shaper Orbs on. Tier 11, we have Desert Spring again for the density. Not so much the outside area of the map, so before the boss, there's a lot of monsters that are scattered around with a fair way in between them. But once you actually get to the boss and beat it down to 50%, and it burrows and does its little event, during that event, while you're chasing around and killing all the little scorpions, those scorpions drop loot now, and they drop a lot of it. I'm considering at the moment using my Elder Orb on Desert Spring for that reason, because you've got heaps and heaps of extra packs of blue monsters that can then turn around and drop Tier 16 maps and other valuable loot. The only other thing that jumps out at me in this tier is Basilica, just because the tile set looks so amazing, and yeah, like I've always liked the stained glass window aesthetic in Basilica, but it has a boss, at least at the moment, that is fairly challenging, and even in tier 11 maps, I expect that Map Innocence will put up a fight. And now we have Tier 12, and one of the best maps in the game for divination cards. I'm expecting that Exalted Orbs will continue to be absolutely central to the to the game economy, as they have been for a very long time. And I'm expecting that any map that has divination cards that give Exalted Orbs will be one that players want to run. And when we can find Precinct on the actual map, because I did have it in my sights before and then it sort of disappeared on me, but Tier 12 Precinct, here we are, just close to the east section of the map, and this has both Abandoned Wealth and the Saint's Treasure as its premium divination cards. Abandoned Wealth being 3/5 of an Exalted Orb, and Saint's Treasure being 2/10, so 1/5, but you need 10 of the cards. The first 5 don't do anything, it's the second 5 that give you 2 Exalts. So you've got Abandoned Wealth and the Saint's Treasure both providing you with raw Exalted Orbs in a considerable amount. Additionally, you've got the Tyrant for a item level 100 Merciless Weapon, which is a pretty rare divination card, but that is a little bonus when you get it. And the Undaunted, which is a corrupted Nemesis item. Did anyone mention that Nemesis items include Headhunter? Most of the time you won't get a Headhunter, but it's something that you can either take a gamble with yourself, or if you're averse to variants, you can just sell it as a divination card. Oh, sorry, as a divination card set and let them take the risk for you. Tier 13, we have the Tower map, which was Tier 15 in the previous league, and nothing else that jumps out at me. Tier 14 is also pretty devoid of great choices. It has the Shrine, which has one of the other divination cards for Headhunter, and it has Ivory Temple, which has a divination card for the Parandus Manor map. I'm expecting Parandus Manor will be really quite a rare map this league. It always is, but players will want it for full Atlas completion bonus, and I think for that reason, Ivory Temple is worth at least keeping in mind. It is definitely a more common divination card than the Fiend in Shrine, although the Fiend will be worth more when you get it. Tier 15 is interesting here, in that the list of Tier 15 maps: Defile Cathedral, Lava Lake, Dark Forest, Core, and Waste Pool. Waste Pool is a map that has a lot of monsters and is liked for that reason. Dark Forest and Core, and Lava Lake for that matter, have 3 of the most annoying and time-consuming boss fights in the game. Lava Lake has Katava from Act 10, who has very few hit points, meaning that basically most builds can burst him down. At least once you're at the point that you're comfortably farming Tier 15s. It's not like you've been in them. It's not like you've just got there and it's your first Tier 15 map of the league. Once you're comfortably farming them, you can usually deal enough damage to Katava to send him into the next phase in very little time, and then you've got to wait through an invulnerability phase. Then you've got to repeat this, and I think it's something like 5 total phases before the boss actually dies. This is with a boss that drops very little loot. Katava Lava Lake Katava has never had any unique divination cards to the boss that I'm aware of, and the zone doesn't really the zone has a divination card for 10 Chaos Orbs, which is quite nice. It's like it's a bonus because you get so many of that card running it that it can be. It makes the map seem compelling to farm it until you just compare it to the other options. In any case, Lava Lake's not a terrible map if you skip the boss, but I don't see people actually killing Katava there very often, except for something to do. Dark Forest will be an interesting one. Rigwald is, assuming Rigwald remains the boss, he is a absolute titan in combat. He's really dangerous. He's one of the, he's probably mechanically the hardest of all of the Atlas of Worlds bosses. I'm just thinking about that to be certain, but he has several deadly attacks that you really need to dodge, and I think that you'll find Katava. That Rigwald will be one of those bosses that if he drops the Wolven King's Bite, people will run that map and they'll learn how to get good at him, just as we did during Talisman League. But failing that, he'll largely be ignored. Also, something really nasty is that a lot of the other hard bosses and the ones with invulnerability phases, a lot of them cannot be twinned. Dark Forest can be. Next up, we've got Core, which is probably the worst map on the entire Atlas at the moment. It seems to have a low monster count in my experience. My gut feeling from Betrayal, and I've done no actual scientific testing of this, is that Core seems to have about 30 or 40% less monsters than other maps of comparable tier. And in that sense, it's sort of like Strand, where Strand is a map that just doesn't have very many monsters, which means that you don't get many map drops, you don't get many item drops, you don't get very much XP. However, Core would be a reasonably compelling place because the boss is nasty. Like, it is Map Malachi, who scales a lot with various map modifiers. He is an absolute terror if the map has increased AoE on it. It's also a difficult fight in conjunction with enemies having multiple projectiles. All these factors can make the core quite a bit harder than people expect. For that reason, I think it would be a compelling spot for the devs to have put one of the more likely to be lucrative divination cards, such as Arrogance of the Vaal, would be the sort of thing that might be found in here. If that's the case, then I'll reassess, but otherwise Core is going to get a hard pass from me. Defile Cathedral I find an interesting choice. The boss is mechanically so simple that I somewhat expect that there's been a change to the boss. The boss as he currently is, Woad, Mockery of Man, is just usually bursts down in a couple of seconds, doesn't have any really dangerous abilities, and the few attacks that he has require him to charge up for a long period of time. So all the player needs to do is just duck around when he starts firing. The outside map is straightforward and simple, and so I think Defile Cathedral could be a pretty good map. In terms of tier 16s, obviously we've got the 4 Guardians. They never change. They have very low absolute monster counts, and that is one of the factors that means that people tend to use their Elder Orb instead. If white Sextants are available in abundance, then I think people will mostly want to use their Elder Orb on Excavation, Haunted Mansion, or just their personal favourite tier 1 to 5 map. I expect a lot of people will be using their Elder Orb on Burial Chamber or some other premium divination card. However, one thing I think is worth considering, players that are running high tier maps will be focused in the center of the atlas a lot, and they will often get their daily Nico, who will spawn on some obscure map, say for instance Primordial Blocks or Colonnade or Siege, some map that they will keep on, that they will be disappointed that they don't have a tier 16 version of. I think in trade leagues, and don't do this in solo self-found, but I think in trade leagues there's a case to be made for picking a tier 13 or 14 map that you don't hate and using your Elder Orb on that with a mind to selling them on the market to people whose Nico has wound up on that, whose daily Nico has wound up on that map. So for instance, if someone has Crimson Temple as their daily Nico, they will get a lot more sulfite if they have access to an Elder Crimson Temple that they can then fully craft. They can then go and use they can chisel it up, they can craft it up with with a couple of Chaos Orbs, keep going until it's got at least 5 mods on it, and then they can conceivably even Vaal them as well. I think there may be a case for trying a tier 13 or tier 14 base map that you don't mind running, because you will be running some of them yourself, and then when you get them, chisel them up, elk them, Vaal them. The ones that go 8 mod and super juicy, sell them. The ones that stay 6 mod or that go unidentified, run them yourself. So that's another option to consider. In any case, my picks for the best maps in this new atlas are tier 12 Precinct, tier 6 Burial Chambers, tier 13 Tower, tier 15 Shaped Moon Temple, and tier 15 Shaped Chateau. So I'm only considering the Shape version here. These have so many monsters in them that they will drop you considerable amounts of tier 16 maps assuming no changes. Tier 16 Haunted Mansion or Tier 16 Desert Spring. My initial plan is going to be to do a full unlock of the Atlas, not doing any shenanigans with keeping an entire tier rigged up so that only one specific map can drop on it of that type. So I'm going to do a full unlock. I'm going to use my Elder Orb on Desert Spring, and I'm going to shape Moon Temple and Chateau, and I'm not going to shape much else. So I'll just leave the remaining Shaper's Orbs unused. I may just use one or two here or there, particularly on, I know I'll definitely be shaping Iceberg in Tier 1. However, I've got a couple of variants in mind that I may well change to. I may uncomplete all Tier 12s so that any Tier 12 drop is going to be a precinct map, and I may even uncomplete all Tier 12 and Tier 13 maps so that precinct is the only option that can drop for either a Tier 12 or a 13. I may also uncomplete all natural Tier 16s, so that's Lair of the Hydra, Forge of the Phoenix, Maze of the Minotaur, and Pit of the Chimera, and then use my Elder Orb on Precinct. Precinct's boss, which is at least assuming this hasn't been changed, is a cluster of rogue exiles, and that boss is very dangerous as a Tier 16 map. But so it's not something I would do the very, very start of the league. But once you've gotten yourself into a bit of a rhythm of running Tier 16s, it's something to consider. Anyways, as I say, the Atlas, every time it changes, which is going to be every league from now on, it is going to change the way we play the game. And I know that at the start of last league, I would have been quite surprised if you told me that I was going to be thinking of running, using my Elder Orb on Precinct or in Desert Spring of all things. And 3 leagues ago I would have said there is no way I'd be using my Elder Orb on that. So let me know what you're thinking of doing yourself. I think there doesn't seem to be an objective best way to set up your Atlas this league. And with the changes to Masters, it feels a lot better to run a full completion at approach, so that wherever your daily Masters land, you already own that map. At least once you've gotten past the point of the league where map scarcity is no longer an issue.